What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Boardman Black and Gold podcast. And we do have more news, even after that Aaron Rodgers news a couple of weeks ago. I don't think we saw this one coming, but is this the biggest news of the offseason outside of the Aaron Rodgers signing? Because I'm thinking it has to be up there.
I think honestly it might be bigger than the Aaron Rodgers because the Aaron Rodgers was so expected by the point that it happened. Like it was talked about so much that it was just like yeah, I'm surprised it didn't happen yet. This is like a what the actual heck? Like I was in the airport and I think I think our it was just like I was like, this isn't real, like this is a joke or something. And then like I looked it up and it's all true. So I think this is like huge. I don't know about the rest of the league as far as it's concerned, but for Pittsburgh, this is crazy.
Yeah. So if you're living under a rock, the news is we made a blockbuster trade with the Miami Dolphins to send Minkah Fitzpatrick back to the Dolphins from whence he came for Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, and then there's a pick swap in there as well. So okay, here's how it broke down for me. So I saw the news that we had acquired Jalen Ramsey, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's great. You know, he's a couple of years removed from being an all-pro, but that's all right. Like, he's still a big name. Like, yes, our secondary is a little older, but okay, that's fine. I like that. And then it comes out like maybe 15 minutes later after I had already had that high, and it's like, oh, Minkah Fitzpatrick was what we sent back. And then it's like, oh, so we did that. And then my enthusiasm was kind of dropped down a little bit. And then another 10 minutes later, it's included that Jonnu Smith, the Dolphins tight end, a longtime tight end, a veteran tight end, was also involved in the deal, and he is coming to Pittsburgh now. So we now have 15,000 tight ends on the roster, and I'm sure we know exactly what we're going to do with all of them. But it was like a roller coaster of emotions, up and down and up and down. And even still, like we're waiting a week to record this. Like this is a week later, and I still don't know quite how I feel about it, honestly.
Well, no, you said it perfectly, roller coaster, because that is exactly what happened. I was in the airport and like I got a text saying something about it, and I looked it up and was like, look at all this, and it was like, oh, Jalen Ramsey got traded, and that's all I heard. And I was like, okay. I was like, all I could think of with Jalen Ramsey is my friend's a Dolphins fan, and like Jalen Ramsey's a huge character, and he's got a big personality, and sometimes they ain't the best personality, but he also, I just remember him destroying our 2017 season. So I was like, oh, this guy. Like I was like, I was I wasn't as excited because I was like, he might be a locker room issue, and he might be like what you were saying. He's probably a couple years away from being out of his prime, maybe sooner. It's hard to tell, but so I was like, okay, like I wasn't even thinking what do we trade him. I was like, I guess that's a gain because besides Joey Porter Jr. and Darius Slay, who knows how he'll be, we don't really have any depth. And then the news came out. My dad texted and was like, Minkah gone too. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I was like, this is ridiculous. This is absurd. Like, what the heck are we doing? Like, this is a guy who says, like, believes in the Steelers way, loves to be a Steeler. And I was just so upset. And then I was like, okay, someone hit the wrong button because what the heck is going on with Jonnu Smith? Like, this is the most random thing I've seen, like, just on top of whatever the heck is going on with Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So it has been a roller coaster of emotions. And even like a couple days later, my dad, and we'll get into this probably a lot more, but my dad sent me an article explaining the trade, and it appears this is a sports writer in Pittsburgh that Minkah hadn't been acting the best and actually wasn't as into the Steeler way as we believed, which I'll dive into that later. But it's been a roller coaster of emotions, like you said, for sure, because I have no idea how to think. I know what to think about Johnny. Well, I guess I don't know what to think about Jonnu Smith. All around, I'm just like, what is
Yeah, I mean it's such a perplexing deal because very rarely in the NFL do you ever see like positions being traded for each other. And I think the interesting part of this
Yeah.
is that there's a lot of money involved because Minkah Fitzpatrick was the highest paid safety in the entire NFL. And now
Right.
a lot of that money is gone. The Steelers are going to have to shoulder some of that dead cap, but there's a lot of incentives for Jalen Ramsey as he's now on the Steelers. So I'm looking at the cap situation for the Steelers right now, and it seems like, I mean, we're still in a decent spot to where we can still add at the trade deadline if we want to. You know, even if we want to make another move this offseason, that's still in play. But the interesting thing is, you know, we talked a lot about Minkah this last year, and a lot of it was not very positive, I feel like. But I think it might have been a point to where we just didn't notice him because he was in a diminished role. And I think we've kind of seen that over the last couple of years, that he was more a preventative role than he was a ball hawk that we saw in the first couple of years that he was with us right after we traded him or traded for him from the Dolphins originally. So the question is now is this Omar Khan's way of saying, okay, we need a little bit more splash out of our safety position with a guy like Jalen Ramsey back there? We're not going to be playing this prevent type of defense. We're actually going to go out and we're going to make some big moves when it comes to the defensive side of the ball. Because last year, Minkah did not have the greatest of years, but he was preventing a lot of worse things from happening on the defensive side. So that's again where I'm just trying to process how everything is shaking out and saying like, okay, what's the plan here? Are we going to be looking very differently or defensively? And is Jalen Ramsey the right answer to fill in the Minkah void that we now have?
Right. And I think that you're absolutely right. This article that I was talking about, I'm gonna go to here a bit, but you're absolutely right in saying that, we talked about him so much, and it never really was anything like great. We were always just like, they must just be using him differently, and he must be in a different role, and like, but he still is such a guy, for the Steelers, and um, we were saying all these things, but this article that my dad had sent kind of really turned ahead on kind of all of that, if this is true. One, it talked about statistically um, that he gave up a really bad quarterback passer rating to opposing quarterbacks. It was like 127.6. And I think it was two interceptions or three interceptions in the span of like 3 or 4 years. But the biggest thing from this article is David Todd, who I did not know him going into this, but he's a Steelers writer and a podcaster, and he made a big claim on Twitter after this had happened, and he said nobody named names, but when guys on the team were talking about 10 guys doing one thing and one guy not doing his job, they were talking about Minkah, and this move is a result of that, which blew my mind because I remember hearing those quotes and I remember hearing those comments, and I was like, who the heck is the guy? And I was always assumed George Pickens or Deontay Johnson or something. But if that's true about Minkah, then like, did we just save ourselves from that another year? And like we were saying, like, oh, they're using it differently. That's why the stats aren't there. Was it because that he was just trying to do his own thing? And that led to the stats not being there. So it was an interesting article to read, especially right after that trade, because I don't know fully if I like believe that, but I think that there could be reason to believe that just because there was such a lack of performance on the field, statistically speaking. So I don't know what you think of that, but that blew my mind to hear like right after that.
So I think, interestingly enough, after that Eagles loss, and maybe the loss right after that, I think we were kind of thinking that. So I think it was Cam Hayward that was the one that was saying, hey, when 10 guys do their job and one guy doesn't, we're not going to be successful. And I think both of us assumed that he was talking about Cam Sutton because whenever he was inserted in there, it was like, okay, whenever he's on the field, our defense is absolutely sucky. But the fact that he's talking about Minkah, and if that's true, and again, I don't, maybe we can't assume that's true, but if that is true, I mean, it kind of makes a lot of sense. Minkah was always there, And in those weeks that we were losing and giving up a whole bunch of points, he was POW MIA. We never heard from him in those weeks, and he wasn't preventing anything either like he was in the first half of the season. If he's going to be in a preventative role and he fails to be preventative but also is not going to be explosive, then what's his point? He's just a stick figure out there. He's not actually doing anything. So that's a really interesting take on that, and that kind of sheds a lot of light on some things. And like you said, maybe this is like us trimming the fat here and getting away from something that could have hurt us even more later on.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it's interesting to think about, like, following that Eagles loss. Like, there's so many plays, like against the Chiefs or even against the Ravens in the playoffs, where it's like, why was Travis Kelsey pretty wide open in the end zone? Why was Rashad Bateman wide open in the end zone? Like, there was a lot of like, why are these guys just popping wide open? And it would explain a lot of that, which is just so interesting. And I would never have suspected it to have come from Minkah Fitzpatrick. So if they did get a hold of that and they were able to get rid of it, I applaud the management for doing that, because, you don't want someone on that team around. But it's just crazy to think, like, another part of me is like, what is going on in that locker room and in that leadership that causes one of your guys who was a diehard Steeler way. Like, he was like, I'm the Steeler, like, we're the Steeler way. This is the black and gold. Like, you got to earn these colors. And like, if you did something that caused him to just give up the black and gold and give up the hope of the Steeler way, like, how abysmal is our locker room right now if that is true?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And, I think a lot of this offseason has been trying to get that out of there. I mean, we traded George Pickens for a third-round pick. We probably could have gotten more from him, but, we saw the offer and we're like, okay, we're going to take that. Addition by subtraction in a way. And it seems like that this has that aura of addition by subtraction with going out and getting Jalen Ramsey, who it seems like is going to be playing a lot of safety this year alongside Deshaun Elliott, which is, I don't think it's normally kind of where he's at in the field. I think he profiles much more as a cornerback. So the fact that he's going to be moving positions, supposedly, I mean, that's a big deal. Now, I think Deshaun Elliott is more than worthy of being the main guy back there. And honestly,
Absolutely.
like the fact that we have him on a team-friendly deal, we just signed him to a contract extension. And oddly enough, he's kind of the new Minkah, to where it's like we snagged him up and we're like, he was the guy that is pointing to the Steelers logo. He says, I want to play for the Steelers logo. So he's the new Minkah Fitzpatrick in a way. And it's crazy how like everything is just a circle with this team. Everything is a circle, even down to like who the players are and their profiles. It's so fascinating to me.
Oh, it really is. And like, that's such a good point. I didn't even think about it, because, Deshaun Elliott's from the Dolphins also, and playing the same position. And he's a guy where it's like he came in his first year and I love him and the whole fan base loves him. And so I'm hoping that he could fill in that role as like the playmaker and make more plays. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm hopeful with Jalen Ramsey, just like I am hopeful with Aaron Rodgers, that, this age talent kind of will come in and like, fit into the mold, I guess, but also be willing to call out the crap that, like, we know is there, and we know that other players can see it and have the frustration, but they're not going to change from it. But, like we've said with Aaron Rodgers, where he's known to be like, if he doesn't like a play or doesn't like this, he's going to change it. I hope that Jalen Ramsey is similar in that, like, hey, if this is just a horrible defense or play we're doing right now, like, I feel like he's a guy who's like, I'm going to do what I want to do and make the play. So we'll see how that mixes in, because that could be bad. Could end up being good, but I don't know. I'm hopeful that he's still got some good years left in him and that he can be a team player, which I don't know if he does that too well.
So he's had at least 2 interceptions in his last 4 seasons. He had 2 this last year with the Dolphins, and I was talking with a friend of mine who is a Dolphins fan, and I was just trading information back and forth with him about Minkah especially, and he's a diehard Dolphins fan, like down to like the most advanced analytics that for like every position. So he was a great resource to me in talking about this stuff. And he was saying that the Dolphins secondary this last year was abysmal. And
Oh,
the
wow.
fact that Jalen Ramsey was kind of in the middle of that, it's like he wasn't able to really thrive in that defense because everybody around him was so awful. And maybe it's the point to where if everybody in the defense is so bad, especially the secondary, you don't have to go pick on Jalen Ramsey, because you can pick on, three or four other guys and you're going to be successful against the Dolphins secondary. So in him coming to Pittsburgh now, it's probably a stark upgrade over what the Dolphins had this last season. Is it a great secondary? No, it's maybe league average, I would say. Would you kind of agree with that?
I'd say it definitely has. If if players play how we think they will, I would say yes. It has the ability to be league average. I think there's a couple question marks, but I think that yeah, we've got a couple stars and then a couple players that's like hoping they still, got the juice in them. So I think that yeah, I would say that's accurate.
So with that, if Jalen Ramsey can be, even a little bit more like the all pro that he was in 2020 and 2021 with the Rams, Super Bowl champion as well, understanding what it takes to win at the highest level, I think that's very valuable. And if Minkah Fitzpatrick is not who we thought he was, then I think the addition of Jalen Ramsey is an excellent addition. Again, is he old? Sure, he's going to be 31 this year. And again, the shelf life of defensive backs in the NFL we've seen is not exceptionally long. We've tried Patrick Peterson in the past. We've tried Levi Wallace. Like these guys, they don't last very long. But this is Jalen Ramsey. He's a 3-time All-Pro. Again, he's a Super Bowl champion. And, maybe he's out of his prime, sure, but his prime was a pretty darn good one. I mean, we talked about it he torched us in that divisional round in 2017. And I can't help but think about that. I think very similarly to you that, that is kind of always in the back of my mind when I hear the word Jalen Ramsey, even though he hasn't been on the Jaguars since the 2020s started. So it's an interesting thing. But I think also the addition of Jonnu Smith is, you're getting a lot of value out of Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, you got two proven NFL caliber players. You had a little pick swap in there, but you also save a little bit of money too, again, with Minkah being the most expensive safety in the NFL coming into this year.
Right. And I think that like that's one point I was going to make is like, we were the expensive defense in the league. And so Jalen Ramsey going from a horrible secondary to the highest paid defense in the league, I think that could make an absolute, like a huge difference. And we might not be the highest paid now because Minka's gone. And like, we, you know, we still might have to eat some of it. But anyways, I think that is I didn't realize that the Dolphins were that abysmal in the secondary, and so to hear that they are and to know that like we're not bad, like we're not horrible in the secondary. We have a lot of pieces that could be great. So adding him, I think, might help in a huge way. And with Jonnu Smith, I guess I'm a little more confused with him because, yes, he is a really good player, but I just wonder how he'll be used because it already felt like our tight ends were underused this year, almost because, I mean, I feel like Darnell Washington, we just kind of forgot he existed after the first 4 games. And Pat Freiermuth, had a fine year. It wasn't anything crazy, but I just hope that we can use all of them, and I hope maximize them to the most of their ability to almost hide our lack of depth in the wide receiver room. And like if he's the answer to that, if he's like oh, this is great. Aaron Rodgers has made some tight ends like who the heck was Richard Rodgers? And then Aaron Rodgers was throwing it to him all the time. Robert Tunyon was a great tight end for a couple of years because Aaron Rodgers. So if I'm hoping that this could turn out to be something that, like, almost, I don't know if he'd replace Darnell Washington in the receiving room, but if we have a dual threat tight end, true dual threat receiving room tight ends, I think it could really help our weak wide receiver room.
I think so too. And I'm looking at this now. Smith is coming off a career year at age 29. He had the most targets, the most receptions. He almost had 1,000 yards. He had just under 900 yards this season as a tight end. And again, the connection that he has with Arthur Smith, he was with the Falcons in 2023 under Arthur Smith. So they're familiar with each other. This last season, Jonnu Smith had 8 touchdowns. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. And he also had 55 first downs. So, I mean, that's pretty substantial, I feel like. And I don't even know if I really had looked at his stats, even before just right now, but that's a weapon, I feel like. And especially if Pat Freiermuth is going to be utilized a little bit more, then you've got 2 problems to worry about on either side of the line, perhaps. And, at that point, it's just like pick your poison. Like, who are your linebackers going to target the most? Is it going to be Freiermuth? Is it going to be Smith? Maybe you have some alignments where they're both on the field at the same time. Maybe you switch them in and out, keep them fresh, and, keep them in the body space to be able to kind of be receiving tight ends for a lot of these packages. But as I'm looking at it a little bit more, like Jonnu Smith, this is a big deal, I feel like, with him and Ramsey in this one deal, I'm convincing myself that this is looking better and better for the Steelers.
Yeah, well, it definitely looks better to me now hearing that his stats, because I had no idea that he had the year that he did. Because I don't know, he just was quiet, I guess, in the news. But it was cool to see. It's cool to hear that because, yeah, to hear a playmaker and then hear his connection to Arthur Smith. And I'm pretty sure he was on at least the 2019 Titans when they did that. I'm pretty sure Arthur Smith was there too. I know he was there in 2020. And so that's really cool that they have that connection, and hopefully Arthur Smith is able to kind of figure some things out. And that he knows how to use Jonnu Smith. We know that. So hopefully that can kind of help maybe get him some familiarity to get comfortable with this, because I feel like there was definitely a struggle with that last year. So yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that, like, all in all, if the things about Minkah are true, and I mean, yeah, Jonnu Smith, it doesn't even seem like there's any ifs with him. It just seems like he's good. So I think that if that's true, I think that this is definitely a huge win for us.
I think so too. And I think that the Dolphins are happy to have Minkah Fitzpatrick back. Obviously, I mean, he was a Dolphin prior to his time with the Steelers. He's aging, and maybe that's going to be better for him. Maybe he'll kind of turn it on and become the ball hawk that he was early on in his career. But I mean, it might be just a solid win-win trade for both sides. The Steelers cutting ties with a guy that may or may not actually want to be a Steeler. Kind of same thing with George Pickens. You get rid of it before it becomes a bigger problem than it already is. So I think this is a net positive. And, we got like I said, two NFL assets, which how often can you say that, you can get that, in these types of trades nowadays? I think that's very valuable. And I guess time is going to tell how these guys are actually going to play in the black and gold. Did you see the hype video that Jalen Ramsey put for himself?
No.
It was like epic stuff. He essentially announced his own trade, and it was like this hype video of him training and becoming a Steeler essentially. And it was really cool. It went unmistakably hard, actually.
Well, I'm gonna have to check that out, because I do remember seeing that post of him saying, "Let me announce it myself, or I'll break the news." And yeah, it's cool to see that he is excited, and that, like, he has that energy, because I think that, like, which makes sense that the secondary was horrible, but it looked like he was very just worn out and tired of Miami. So I'm glad that that isn't being carried over to Pittsburgh, and it's a more of a, like, let's freaking go as the Steelers. So I'm hoping that Jonnu Smith is the same way, and that this adds some, like, new life to, like, honestly, a team that felt stale. Like, I think that, like, we were talking about it even with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. Like, it just kind of felt like, what are we doing? And like, what's going on? Like, what is the goal here? And adding these guys, we may not have figured out what the goal is or what we're doing, but it's like, oh, like, all right, cool. Like, this is new. This is fresh. This guy was a stud, and like can still be one. So I'm hopeful that this all around just helps us. And who knows? Hey, maybe it changes a game or two on our predictions.
It might, and we might have to re-record that. I think that we might have to track towards that end. So I have not released the previous recording of it, and maybe I'll release it later on. But we might have to just re-record that and go with it with the new information that we have. And I mean, you got 3 new players, all of which are probably going to be starting caliber players. I mean, that might have to change some things. So we'll have to dive into that when the time comes for that. But I do want to say, so the last thing we want to talk about in this episode, Omar Khan has been given a contract extension. So he's going to be here for, I believe, another 3 years. The Steelers renewed his contract, and he'll be with the Steelers as the GM for another 3 years. Here's what I'll say to this. Your comment moments ago about us being stagnant. This is kind of what we've been saying, at least all of this last year. It's like, why do we keep trying the same thing over and over and over again and trying to be any different? I mean, there are some polar people on both sides of Omar Khan. Some people love him. I think both of us love him, but there are a lot of people that don't like what he's doing. And even a move like this, like, it's perplexing to some people, some Steelers fans even, and they're wondering, like, what the heck's going on? But I think even the more that I think about this specific Minkah trade, it's okay. We're not gonna fall victim to the saying that we're just doing the same thing over and over again. We're gonna try something different. If that means Jalen Ramsey, if that means Jonnu Smith, if that means getting rid of Minkah Fitzpatrick, if that means bringing in Aaron Rodgers, if that means signing a lot of these free agents, like, we're gonna try something different. And if it doesn't change, then again, it just completely shifts things back to Mike Tomlin. And it's like, okay, we've been trying to change, but the one other thing that hasn't changed in the last 20-some years is the thing that's perhaps holding us back. So what do you say to that?
Well, I completely agree. And I love Omar Khan, and I think that I'm very happy with this. Like, never not really been pleased with one of his draft boards. And I agree. Like, he doesn't take anything sitting down. Like, this year, it was like, man, like, what the heck is even the point of this year? And then he was like, all right, like, I'm gonna DK Metcalf, and then it was like, and that was huge. Like, that was huge, even though everything else was still in shambles, and like that was a huge deal, especially for the Steelers. We never do anything like that. And then getting Aaron Rodgers, whatever, but we're getting these guys. Like, he's not like, you can see that there's no give up. Like, he's just continually trying to see how we can be better. And I think, like, you can even go back to last year of, like, after the 2023 season, it was like, what? Like, we put all our hopes kind of into this season, thought Kenny was going to be great. Now what the heck? And he was like, you know what? Here you go. Boom. There's Justin Fields. There's Russell Wilson. Here's Patrick Queen. Here's Deshaun Elliott. Like, let me go and get you these guys. And it's not his fault that he doesn't have a coach that can develop the talent that is Justin Fields and that can't develop these players. Like, he's giving the Steelers the pieces of the puzzle that we need. It's not his fault that they are being put into place.
I agree. I second and third everything you just said. He's setting us up to win. The thing that I say all the time when it comes to upper management is set your team up to win. If you're a manager for a baseball team, we were talking about the Pirates a little bit before we went live. Like, Donnie Kelly, like, he's setting the Pirates up to win more than Derek Shelton did. And that's manifesting in the fact that they have a better record ever since Don Kelly took over. I mean, Omar Khan is giving the Steelers, like you said, the pieces of the puzzle to be successful. Now it's actually a part of, can you coach this team and the talent that you have on this team to be successful? Because you have all the pieces. Now you just have to put it together. Now you have to just work it to where it will be successful. I think Omar Khan continues to do that year in and year out, and he's not afraid to cut ties either. He's not afraid to cut ties. He got rid of Kenny Pickett. He got rid of George Pickens. He got rid of Minkah Fitzpatrick. he's not afraid to nip it in the bud and say, okay, this isn't working. Let's try something else. And I think he needs to be, he needs to be given his flowers for that, I think.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think that signing him to 3 more years and continuing to see what he does more emphasizes the fact that Mike Tomlin is not doing his job and not able to win because you saw okay, from 2014 or 2013 to 2017, Mike Tomlin had the same guys. It was a very consistent team and couldn't get it done. And you had the best trio in offense and you still couldn't get it done. And then you still had some Ben for some time after that. And then now it's been I'd say from 2021 onward, every year has looked so unbelievably different. And you haven't found a way to win a playoff game any of those years. And it's not oh, well, he went from, this guy who started 10 games to this rookie. It's no, you went from a Hall of Famer, Ben Roethlisberger, to, okay, I'll give you Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. Those guys are hard. But then you went to Justin Fields, but more so Russell Wilson, who's also a Super Bowl champion and has won a lot of playoff games. And now you're going to Aaron Rodgers, who, I mean, come on, he's one of the highest decorated quarterbacks of all time, statistically speaking. So, if you can't do it with these guys, and yes, maybe they're out of their prime a little bit, but it's still Joe Montana was out of his prime when he went to the AFC Championship. John Elway was out of his prime when he won his 2 Super Bowls. That's not really an excuse, especially when it's Aaron Rodgers, because Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks of our time. So I just can't emphasize enough how people need to wake up to the fact that it doesn't matter what pieces get put into place if there was continued outcome. Name another coach that can take these teams that, like I said, they're completely different and have the same exact record and do the same exact thing. How could you do the same exact thing? Well, he hasn't done it yet, but how could you do the same exact thing with Aaron Rodgers that you did with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph? I just don't understand how people can see that there's one factor here that is the constant, and it's Mike Tomlin.
Right. It's the X. It's the X variable, the thing that doesn't change. Everything else around it changes in hopes that the X will change.
Yeah.
But the X has never changed. It's never changed. And the thing that I'm the interesting thing about kind of what you're talking about is we don't have a single weak unit on this team, not bottom 4th in the NFL type of unit. We talked about how the Dolphins had an abysmal secondary. Yes, it's hard to win games when even just one portion of your team is really, really bad. But the Steelers have never had that. Even in these last couple of years, sure, has the offensive line been bad? Yeah, but it's gotten better. Sure, has the secondary been bad? Yeah, but it's gotten better. And we are going to these ends to make things better. This trade to get Jalen Ramsey, to get Jonnu Smith is in an effort to make our units better. Sure, do we have 1,000 tight ends right now? Yes. But okay, we got a really, really good one in there now as well. So our units are not weak by any means. So at what point do we say, okay, whoever the person is that is controlling these units, he is the problem? Because if we have so much roster turnover, I mean, if you look at the roster, I think from 3 years ago to what it is now, how many people are still on that roster, especially now that Minkah's gone, right?
Right. Yeah, not a lot. And that's the crazy thing. And the fact that it's still, what you said, we're probably top 20 and that's probably a little generous, but top 20 in every category. Wide receiver room, maybe a little bit lower than that, but still it's not horrible. And we probably have the best kicker in the league too. I know we do have the best kicker in the league. And so it's crazy that you're why do we keep free passes? There are coaches, I'm trying to think of a recent scenario, who have had next to nothing. Or look at the Packers 2 years ago, who had the youngest team in the NFL, and they went and stunned the Cowboys in Dallas. And not no experience. They're the youngest team in the NFL, and Matt LaFleur got them there. And it's when does that become a talking point of these coaches that went to a place that was doing nothing, that turned someone like Baker Mayfield around to the playoffs every year. And it's like Baker Mayfield was like a step away from retirement and from like no one's gonna get you. And like you could say that with Geno Smith too, where like someone turned his career around. It's like, when are we gonna start talking about that? And when are we gonna start talking about how Mike Tomlin has continued? Sure, 2022 he exceeded expectations, but every other year he has probably gone lower in expectations than anyone expects. Now people probably expect the 500 lose a playoff game. But for a long time, he let people down year after year after year. And now people just know that that's what he does. And why is that seen as okay? And why is that seen as you keep your job? Like, oh, it's so annoying.
Well, even Justin Fields, like we were thinking that this was the chance for Justin Fields to revive his career. Never had any success with the Bears. Didn't have a place for success. The team around him was bad. Now he comes to the Steelers. He gets handed these first 6 starts, on a platter because of Russell Wilson's injury. And it's like, okay, let's see what we can do. That was Mike Tomlin's chance to take the ashes of something that was already gone and burned and to take it and give it to some success. And, we lost our playoff game. Sure, we had Russell Wilson back, but, now Justin Fields, he's off somewhere else. And, we've talked about it, that we think that he's going to do great with New York. So he had his chance, but, it wasn't Mike Tomlin that got him that chance.
Right. Yeah. And that's the whole unfortunate point, is that like these other guys get their chances, and because they're coached, they're able to make it. And I think that Justin Fields literally wanted to stay in Pittsburgh, didn't even want that much money. And like, what was the point of moving on from him? Because you couldn't coach him to be better? I don't understand how this is okay, where a coach is basically publicly being like, unless you're like ready to play an NFL game and I just got to tell you to get out there, I don't want you. Like, why is that okay? Why is it okay for a coach whose job is to coach to be like, I want the guys that already know how to play and that I don't have to develop?
Well, even thinking about Will Howard, and I think Aaron Rodgers has been very vocal in saying that I want to teach up Will Howard, because it seems like that this is going to be Aaron Rodgers' final year, and he wants to be a mentor to Will Howard. And this entire time I'm thinking to myself, I like that Will Howard pick. It's a very great value pick late in this last draft, but if we can't develop him, then none of it matters. What happens in 2026 when we don't have Aaron Rodgers or something like that? We're going to have to turn to something, and it's probably not going to be Mason Rudolph. So what are we going to turn to? Are we going to turn to a guy that we've been developing over this year? And again, red lights flashing. Here's your chance, Mike Tomlin. You have a year to work on this project. You have a year to work on Will Howard and get him prepared for 2026. No matter how much success or lack of success you have in 2025, you've got a year coming ahead to figure out things with Will Howard and see if he can't be a very good keystone for your team moving forward. Because we got DK Metcalf for a long time now, so who's going to be throwing him the football? And that's the whole thing. Mike Tomlin has an entire year to figure this out with a guy that he can develop. What's he going to do with it? That's the age-old question. Can't say anything yet because we haven't seen any of that. But that is a question that's going to loom large over the next calendar year.
Right. And I think that it'll be really interesting to see, because I think we've seen thus far that Mike Tomlin can do that because of, everything that's happened with, Kenny Pickett. And I mean, there's been plenty of other examples like Mason Rudolph. Like he had a year under Ben and then he was thrown into it because of Ben's injury. But you could see Mike Tomlin obviously hadn't developed him yet. Landry Jones. I mean, who remembers that name? Like, and again, Ben, Ben was pretty vocal about not liking that they picked a quarterback and he wasn't really going to help him. But still, that's the coach's opportunity to step in and be like, well, let me help you. And like, obviously we saw both times he did not help and did not get him any better. So, I mean, this might be best case scenario where at least Will Howard will have a year of the very talented Aaron Rodgers who wants to coach him. Because again, I just don't think Mike Tomlin can, based off of the history, based off of the past. But who knows? I would love to see a a
Corner
corner
turns.
turn.
There you go.
Yeah, a corner turn. My bad. And for Will Howard to become the quarterback of the future, I would absolutely love that. So, yeah, we'll see. I hope Aaron Rodgers has enough time to be able to impart all that wisdom on him.
Yeah. I mean, this turned from a Minkah trade into the philosophy of the Steelers for this upcoming season, and we'll probably dive into more of that as the season gets closer. It's getting closer. I mean, what are we in? We're in July. We're only 2 months away, really, so it's coming pretty fast.
Crazy.
Yeah, we're getting there.
It's pretty crazy.
So, Steelers football, we're going to be ramping up here pretty soon, and, we'll have a lot more conversations. One of those things will probably be our schedule release episode, which we probably will have to re-record at some points, which I think we can do that. That should be easy enough. But with how we've gone so far, I mean, this is a lot of big news here in this offseason between the DK Metcalf trade, Aaron Rodgers, now Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. So plenty of assets. We'll see what Mike Tomlin can do with them, and we'll see what the Steelers do with them here in 2025. But as for this, do you got any final thoughts on this one?
No, I guess to kind of close it out, center back in on what this episode was supposed to be about, which is that there is some hope, even though it kind of ended there a little bleak, there is definitely hope with this trade, I think, with Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith. And I think it brings some energy. So, yeah, I'd say that this is, even though it didn't end hopeful, this is a hopeful episode for sure.
I think so too. And I think that even just talking through it, I think helped me to be a little bit more hopeful about it too.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that was helpful for, I think, the both of us to kind of look at this, with unbiased minds and try to figure things out how we were kind of trying to parse through them. So big news for the Steelers here in this offseason. As always, Boardman Black and Gold is sponsored by Zecca Enterprises, crafting furniture solutions in northwestern Pennsylvania. You can call 919-406-4679 to turn your furniture problems into furniture solutions. Well, Zane and David will be back on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast once again at some points. Again, we kind of just go based on the news and as it comes out here in these last couple of weeks. Who knows? Maybe we'll make another big trade or maybe another big signing or something like that, and we'll be back very soon. But until then, thanks for listening to this episode, and we will see you next time on the Boardman Black and Gold podcast.